Hello, I'm Andrew Veach. Welcome to Media Planning. So, in our previous talks, you'll have honed the perfect advertising creative. Now we need to get your message out there and start spreading it like patient zero. So before we dive into the depths of media, let's just think bigger picture. What is the point of advertising? And broadly, this is divided into two things. Brand advertising, which is about raising awareness, and this is called above the line, and direct response advertising, which is called below the line. And I guess historically, people were maybe a bit snobbish about below the line, as I guess you can tell by the term. I mean, originally, above the line meant something that an ad agency got commissioned for, and below the line was something we didn't get commissioned for. A classic example would be, Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola's advertising is all brand advertising. It's about building awareness. And actually, Coca-Cola, don't really want a direct response. They want you to go into a store or a restaurant and buy Coke. On the other hand, in e-commerce, generally what we're wanting is a visit to the website, which would be a response. So certainly in e-commerce, usually it will be direct response. So it's a very important thing to bear in mind if you're reading books about marketing, that you should be reading books about direct response marketing, not really about brand marketing. There's also a difference in pace. Generally, brand adverts will be in short bursts of maybe 8, perhaps 12 weeks a year, maybe repeated a couple of times a year. Direct, on the other hand, will just be constant, because you constantly need to feed the machine. You may potentially do both. If you do both, I think it's important to have two different budgets. So you have a direct budget, which you'll measure by cost per customer acquired, and you'll have a brand budget, which you'll measure based on awareness. Of course, sometimes you'll do, the joke in some of the companies I've worked with is, when a direct response advert goes wrong, people say it's a brand advert because it's been good for the brand, but of course that's not the case. So this takes us to the first rule. All advertising must always be measured. We then drop the less effective adverts and do more of the things that are working. Which brings us to the question, of course, of how do we measure? There's the John Wanamaker quote, "Half my advertising doesn't work, the problem is I don't know which half." So let's see how we might go about doing that. Response measurement. Again, a really common way is the coupon code, where you simply quote a code for money off. And again, all of the e-commerce platforms will support this. It's extremely important that you use a lot of different codes. Recently I was speaking to a company who'd used a single promotional code for every one of their campaigns. This is maybe slightly more older-fashioned, but back 10 years ago, you would have multiple phone numbers. Back at Daesh, I think we had more than 30 toll-free numbers at one point. So we were using different numbers on different adverts and different publications. Cookies, of course, for online cookies for attribution is an extremely complex subject, so we're actually going to cover that separately in a later talk, so we'll just leave that for now. Econometrics. So I guess econometrics is often used for TV, but it's about giving you it's about building a statistical model of endogenous factors, in other words, the sort of things that you're doing, and exogenous factors, so external factors like perhaps the weather or the competitive environment of the season, and putting all this together to try and work out what might be impacting what. It's a very complex thing which normally takes quite a few months to put together, but something big And then a much simpler thing is regional uplift. Again, in a market like the UK, a small market like the UK where most media is national, we probably don't really use this very much. But in a market like the US, where you tend to be marketing more at the state level, obviously regional uplift is something you can look at. You know, if you run a campaign in California, what uplift have you seen in California? Okay, so these are just some of the metrics that we would use for response measurement. Cost per response, CPR. Sometimes in e-commerce we talk about CPV, cost per visit. So we just look at what we spent on the media and divide it by the number of responses that we got. Response rate, what percent of people that saw the media actually responded to it. And conversion rate, again, conversion rate is a pretty critical one. And we actually have a separate talk later on conversion optimization. And again, probably, certainly for a direct response business or an e-commerce company, the most critical metric is CAC, you know, the cost of customer acquisition. Sometimes it's called CPA, but that's just exactly the same thing. Now, obviously what I've just covered is all of the methods you would use for measuring direct response. Brand is a little bit more complex. In brand, we're talking about awareness. So the normal way you would do this is with an awareness survey. Normally you would do an awareness survey before your activity, and then a few months later, awareness survey after. And actually, even if you're in a direct marketing company, I still think an awareness survey once a year is probably quite a good thing to do. An awareness survey is maybe about $3,000, something like that, so it's not a hugely expensive thing to do. There's two types of awareness. We have unprompted awareness. So again, if I was doing an awareness survey for Machine Labs, I would be saying, what analytics companies have you heard of? I'd be hoping that someone would mention Machine Labs. Prompted awareness is where you specifically mention your brand and ask, have you heard of us? So in this case, we'd be saying, have you heard of Machine Labs? And then there's a sort of a combined measure where you put both of these things together. The usual way to do this is an omnibus survey, and what this just means is you ask the market research company will speak to consumers and they will do brand awareness for multiple companies at the same time, and that just makes it quite a bit cheaper. Okay, so let's move on to look at some media. We'll start with traditional media. Now, this is in order of cost. So I'm actually I'm starting with the most expensive on a cost per thousand basis, and I'm working my way down to the cheaper forms. So first up, direct mail, or junk mail as consumers will often call it. Certainly in the US, this is still very, very big. In fact, the US is the biggest market, I believe, for direct mail. In the UK and Europe, it's maybe a little bit smaller. It's slightly in decline, but it's still a useful method. Generally, it's probably better, because it's a high cost per thousand, you need to be very careful that you've got an extremely good database. So usually it's more about reactivation or retention rather than recruitment, although it can sometimes work for recruitment for the right product. Door drops. Door drops are the sort of the close cousin of direct mail. Door drop isn't addressed to anyone, but it's still put through a mailbox. Again, a very common use would be, perhaps a pizza restaurant opening up. They would use door drops in the local area. It's a good way of targeting a local area, and it's a little bit cheaper than direct mail. Inserts. Again, inserts is simply a marketing leaflet inserted into something, perhaps into a product delivery or a statement or a catalogue or a newspaper or magazine. Inserts are great, and we, as they're so important, we actually have a separate talk just on inserts coming later. Out of home, so this will just be anything, maybe a poster, beside a freeway, or posters beside, a bus stop, anything outside, and perhaps again, in some markets you can have taxis or buses painted with your marketing message. Out of home tends to be more difficult for response, just because obviously when people are outside, they're probably less likely to respond and buy your product, but it's maybe good for awareness. Off the page, so this is simply an advert in a newspaper or magazine where you're trying to get someone to buy or respond directly off the page. And television. Television is still huge. Again, in most markets now, television is smaller than, I think in all markets it is now smaller than digital, but it's still very, very powerful and very trusted. And although production has a cost, the actual media cost is very cheap. Next we have radio. Radio tends to be a little bit cheaper than TV, so again, very inexpensive, and it can also be a good way of reaching men, or reaching people when they're in their cars. A lot of commuters listen to radio. And radio in virtually all markets is extremely regional. And then finally, the cheapest thing of all is a reader offer. So a reader offer will normally be, in a newspaper or magazine, and usually the cost per thousand of a reader offer will be zero. So normally it'll be an agreement that there is some payment per order received, so the risk is with the media owner. Okay, so let's quickly look at some digital media. Now I suppose the first thing is search PPC, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And in most places, that is now effectively Google. Google do dominate this market. Search PPC is on an auction model, and again, we do cover that in more detail later. The main thing to be aware of is that as there's been a big move of budget onto Search PPC, prices have gone up dramatically. So while it would normally have been the cheapest method of customer recruiting 10 years ago, due to the price inflation, that is usually not the case now. Display advertising, so this is just, I guess, a bucket for the non-search advertising, which is usually PPC rather than a CPM basis. I've usually struggled to get display advertising to work for recruiting customers, with the exception of remarketing, where you retarget customers who've come to your website but not bought. And again, I'm sure everybody will have seen that. Email. Again, email is certainly something that's not good for recruitment, but it is very, very good for reactivation of sending offers to existing customers. Although we are seeing probably a reduction in customer use of email as people move to other platforms. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with email in the longer term. Social, and Facebook for the sort of the older audience, and Instagram for the younger audience is the big one here. And certainly we find Facebook at the moment actually seems to be very effective. There's fantastic targeting and it's not too expensive. Daily deals. So in the US, daily deals would be Groupon, and in many other markets too. In the UK, we've got things like Voucher. There's certainly high volume in there, but it does have to be a very strong discount. And finally, we've got marketplaces. The biggest marketplace is obviously Amazon, and we have eBay too. Okay, so when I'm planning advertising, I think about 3 dimensions, and let's just go through each in turn. So let's start with price. Price is normally cost per thousand. In traditional media, they will talk about CPM rather than CPT. In this case, instead of cost per thousand, it's cost per mille, because they like to use Latin for 1,000 for some reason. I have no idea why, but that's what they do. And obviously, cheaper media is probably going to perform better. A few things are just to be aware of. For press, people will talk about readership and circulation. So circulation will be the actual sales of the magazine, and then the salespeople will multiply it up on the view that maybe one magazine is read by more than one person. But we would just ignore that and simply concentrate on circulation. And incidentally, you also want it to be full price circulation, not where copies of it have just been dumped very cheaply in bulk. Net versus gross. Normally, certainly not so much for digital media, but for conventional media, there will be a commission of maybe 10 to 15% being paid to a media buyer. So normally you will have an arrangement where some of that commission is refunded to you. So hence you'll have the gross price, and then the net price is what you'll actually pay with that commission refund. And again, if you're in Europe where we have VAT, you should ignore that when you're working out your price. So the second dimension is targeting. Before diving into this, targeting has a cost. There will always be a cost of maybe double to up to maybe 10 times the CPT for targeting. So one of the things to bear in mind is actually if you've got a very broadly applicable product, it may not be worth spending money on targeting at all. I mean, if your product is something that could be bought by say 10% of the population, it may not be worth paying that premium for targeting. On the other hand, if it's, for example, a shaving product for men, there's no point showing that advert to women. So, but assuming that we are targeting, that you'll typically have some form of regional targeting for TV or radio. Virtually everything will have demographic targeting, usually around sort of gender, age or interest. And once we hit digital, targeting explodes. I think there's literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of targeting options available on Facebook. Okay, and then third dimension, after price and targeting, is trust. I think this is a very important thing to bear in mind. But again, for some products, trust is probably more important than others. So, for example, diet, you certainly want a high trust medium. Anything to do with financial services, trust is extremely important. Now, obviously, the highest trust method would be a recommendation from a friend. Probably pretty much the lowest trust would be receiving some spam, particularly spam full of spelling mistakes. TV is very trusted, and again, one of the things we'll often see when people do TV campaigns is using the as seen on TV in their other campaigns. I think it would be true to say that online advertising is still slightly less trusted, and in part this is true. I mean, there still is a lot of fraud online, particularly from sort of less known names. And again, when we're sort of in press, a full page ad is definitely a lot more trusted than a very small ad. Okay, so I've come up with this concept of distance from purchase, and I guess my idea is there are some moments when consumers are quite close to buying things, and other moments when they aren't. So one thing to think about would be the difference between someone visiting a general website and someone visiting eBay or Amazon. So my argument would be when people go to eBay or Amazon, they're actually really thinking about buying. When they're reading a newspaper, they're probably not. So, you know, in Google advertising, I would always switch on the partner networks to make sure that my ads are appearing on eBay and Amazon. I mean, clearly searching on Google for a product, you're almost certainly thinking about buying if you're doing that. And again, if you think about TV, certainly if you're in the US or the UK or Germany, we have QVC, which is a fantastic sort of shopping network. So certainly people watching QVC are definitely more in a mood for buying than people just watching a normal programming. And again, if you think to reading a magazine, when you're reading the main body of the magazine, you're perhaps in one frame of mind. If you go to the supplier directory at the back, you know, again, you're clearly thinking about purchase. So I would certainly strongly bear in mind when I'm buying media, how close is this media to purchase. Okay, so we've ran through pricing, targeting, distance from purchase. We've got things are going great, and then we get a meeting with the CEO saying, right, this is great, let's do more. Unfortunately, what we hit at this point is media capacity. Efficient spend is not unlimited. Now, usually in business, you have an economy of scale. So if you buy more of something, the price goes down, and that's just the way things work. But I'm afraid that's not the way it works in advertising. In advertising, generally, there's a diseconomy of scale, and the more money you spend, the more difficult it gets. And this is because usually what you'll do is your most efficient things and your best things first, and then when you reach capacity there, you have to move down your list. I mean, I can certainly say, when I had my first marketing budget was $300 a month, I then had a marketing budget of about $1.2 million a month. I did not spend $1.2 million as effectively as I spent $300, and that's just the way it is. Now, some media have higher capacity than others. You know, Google PPC would be a case in point. In Google PPC, there only are a certain number of searches for some of these key terms. Once you've bought all of that search capacity, that's it. Television, on the other hand, has very high capacity. I mean, you can quite easily spend, you know, hundreds of thousands on TV. So what you will generally find as you end up with a bigger budget is you'll end up with a mix of smaller amounts of money in very efficient spend and maybe bigger amounts of money in less efficient spend. But perhaps, although perhaps some of that gives you a bit of an uplift that you maybe can't completely measure. Okay, so that's us. So let's just have a quick summary. First rule is, I think, arguably the most important of all of them. If the one thing I would like you to take away from this talk is for you to look at yourself and make a commitment, all advertising you do will be measured. Repeat after me. All advertising I do will be measured. Then think about the 3 dimensions: price, targeting, trusted media, and then think about this distance from purchase. How likely is the consumer of this media to be thinking about buying? And finally, once you've got something that works, don't overdo it. Don't spend over capacity. So thank you very much. See you next time.